A boy fell in love with his best friend's mother, but is the woman ready to leave her family for him? During a teachers' meeting, the school principal announces a new law. According to the new rules, all students must wear the same school uniform. All the teachers support this innovation, but only the French teacher dislikes it. Monsieur Germain comes home and starts checking the essays written by his 8th grade students. His wife, Jeanne, comes home and asks him what he's doing. He says that he has never read such bad essays in his life before this moment. He calls his students barbarians who are unable to think even a little without the internet. Jeanne says that she hears this every year. As an example, her husband reads a few essays aloud. He says that he became a teacher to help students love literature, but instead he got teenagers who can't think without the internet. But soon he comes across an essay that is more than 2 sentences long. A boy named Claude has written 2 whole pages about how he spent his weekend. The man begins to read aloud. Claude says he has been watching this house for a long time. He often comes to sit on a bench and looks at this house from afar. Claude set himself the goal of getting inside and finding out how the people living there live. His classmate Raphael lives in this house. On Friday, Raph failed his math exam, and Claude decided to offer him his help. And by Saturday, Raphael invited Claude to his home to study math together. Claude brought some math problems for Raph. To distract him, Claude suggests drinking some cola and leaves the room. Finally, he finds himself in the house he dreamed of entering. He imagined it somewhat differently in his mind. At some point, the boy smelled cheap perfume. He saw a middle-aged woman in the living room and began to stare at her intently. The woman noticed him and decided to take him to the kitchen. She thought he was lost. The woman tells the boy he can feel at home and returns to the living room. Claude went back to Raphael's room and decided to start helping him solve math problems. The teacher immediately notices the boy's talent. The next day, after the lesson, the teacher asks Claude to stay for a while. Monsieur Germain says it is unethical to write an essay about his classmate's family. The teacher says that if someone were to read this essay, Claude would be in big trouble. But the boy sees nothing wrong with what he is doing and gives the teacher the second part of his essay. Claude leaves the school and meets Raphael. The boy wonders why Raphael caught his attention and not someone else. After all, Raphael is an ordinary boy from a normal family. Claude was curious to be in their home and find out how a normal, ordinary family lives. Monsieur Germain goes to his wife's exhibition. She tells him that her exhibition might soon be closed, and she will be left without a job. Monsieur Germain mentions that Claude wrote a new part of the essay, and the woman asks him to read it quickly. Claude came to visit his classmate again. Raphael's mother was measuring the window with a tape measure, and Claude was watching her intently. The woman climbed down from the ladder, greeted the boys, and then offered them a snack. She immediately returned to the ladder. The curves of her body were visible through her dress, and Claude continued to watch this with pleasure. Jeanne finds it strange that a 16-year-old teenager dreams about his classmate's mother. She advises her husband to tell the principal about everything, but Germain is sure the boy does not pose a threat. He considers Claude a rebel trying to make a statement. Monsieur Germain decides to help the boy become a writer because he undoubtedly has talent. The next day, the teacher meets Claude during the break and gives him his books so the boy can gain experience. Claude gives the professor the next part of his essay. Returning to his friend's ordinary family home, he once again felt like a part of their life. Suddenly, Raphael's father, also named Raphael, enters the room. He reminds his son that they will be watching a basketball game and eating pizza today. The man invites Claude to stay and watch the game with them. Claude gladly agrees, as this is a great opportunity to learn more about this family. During the match, Raphael Sr.'s boss calls him and asks him to come to work immediately. The man gets dressed and leaves. Monsieur Germain does not like how Raphael wrote this part of the story. He lists several literary genres, but none seem to fit Claude's work. He asks Claude to add more details and focus on the characters of his story. The teacher also asks him not to judge the characters, as a writer should be able to describe them in various ways. Claude doesn't really like that the teacher gives him advice, but he definitely likes that the teacher is reading his work. Claude decides to heed his teacher's advice and changes his story. This time he pays more attention to the interior, details, and the main characters. Aster sits on the couch and begins to draw in her notebook. The woman dreams of building her own country house, and Claude is attracted by her desire. Raphael's father works for a company that collaborates with the Chinese. The man simply hates them. During the phone call, Raphael's mother approaches her husband and tries to eavesdrop on the conversation. The man leaves for work, while the woman sits down on the couch with the boys and watches the basketball game, understanding absolutely nothing about it. The new version of the story pleases the teacher more. He praises his student and gives him a few more books. After work, Monsieur Germain goes to his wife's gallery. She shows him some new projects. This is her last chance to save her gallery. The man brings with him the new part of the story, and the woman stops all her activities to listen. Claude came to visit his friend again. He gives Raphael a very difficult math problem and leaves the room. He wants to get a better look at the house. Claude goes downstairs and sees the married couple. Raphael tells his wife that he no longer wants to obey his boss and suggests that they work together on a new business. The woman wants to work as a designer, but the man says his business is much more important. Esther tells her husband that she doesn't like their son bringing his friend home. She thinks Claude is strange and wants to forbid Raphael from inviting him over. Monsieur Germain is convinced that Claude is making up what he writes about. The next day, the teacher tries to explain that Claude's story has reached a dead end. He needs to add more challenges for the characters. Claude really likes this idea, but soon he will no longer be able to visit Raphael. The math exam is coming up, and Raph won't be able to pass it. Claude asks the teacher to steal the answers and give them to him so that Raphael can pass the exams. The teacher says he cannot do this, but Claude gives him an ultimatum. If Germain does not help him, Claude will no longer write the story. Monsieur Germain is so engrossed that he can't let that happen. After lessons, he steals the exam answers and gives them to Claude. Raphael gets the highest score. His parents are very happy, and they thank Claude for his help. Raphael and his father invite Claude to play basketball together on Saturday, but Claude refuses. Claude notices that Raphael is upset to hear this answer, which means that Claude has become his best friend. Raphael suspects that Monsieur Germain gave Claude the correct answers. Raphael warns his friend and says that Monsieur Germain is very strange, just like his wife. Saturday comes. Claude waits for the father and son to leave the house, then rings the doorbell. Esther meets him and asks why he has come. Claude says he forgot his math textbook. Esther lets him into the house, and Claude finally has a chance to be alone with her. Esther has already changed her opinion about Claude. She offers him a Coke. During the conversation, Claude reveals that he doesn't have a mother. Claude's plan worked. This story triggered Esther's protective instincts. The woman talks about her dream of becoming a designer and architect. Claude just keeps listening, and the woman is glad to finally be able to open up to someone. Claude only thinks about how he wants to be alone with her more often. Jean finds Claude's behavior abnormal, but Germain is convinced that the boy is making it all up and that everything he writes about is untrue. The next time Claude visits Raphael, he gives him a difficult math problem. Then Claude goes into the bedroom and examines Esther's belongings, but the husband and wife unexpectedly return home, and Claude eavesdrops on their conversation. The man has work problems again. Claude tells the teacher about his main idea. The entire story should take place only in the house, and his character's goal is to make Esther fall in love with him, despite all the difficulties. However, Monsieur Germain says that Claude has forgotten about the other characters in his story. He should pay more attention to them. Claude follows the advice and goes to play basketball with Raphael and his father. It turns out that Claude is good at basketball, and Raphael's father likes this. The man already considers Claude a part of their family. Sometime later, Monsieur Germain calls Raphael to the board, and the boy has to read his essay about his best friend. Raphael says that Claude is his best friend. The students laugh at the boy, and Raphael feels humiliated. He tells Claude that he wants to beat up the teacher, but Claude suggests publicly accusing him and writing about it in the school newspaper. Monsieur Germain apologizes to the boy, realizing that he is upset, but Claude can't be stopped. He writes the article himself on Raphael's behalf. As a result, the teacher receives a reprimand from the principal, and even the boy's father comes and threatens him. The friends stay up late, and Claude spends the night at their house. For Claude, this is a very important moment he has long awaited. He spies on Esther and Raphael as they sleep and imagines many things. He is convinced that Esther hasn't been happy in her family life for a long time. Jean reads this and doesn't understand why her husband is helping the boy write about such things. But the professor says it's normal for a teenager to think about such topics. Jean adds that her exhibition is being closed down and she will soon be out of a job. During a meeting with the student, Monsieur Germain criticizes his story, believing that Claude has stopped developing the main plot. Claude visits the house again and notices that Esther and Raphael are arguing. She suspects her husband of cheating. Claude approaches the woman and gives her his poems. During the next meeting, Esther thanks the boy for what he did for her, and Claude kisses the woman. Raphael observes all this, and the next time he enters Raphael's room, he sees a horrifying scene. Monsieur Germain comes to school and sees that Raphael's desk is empty. He worries that everything Claude writes about is true, but it turns out that Raphael is just sick. Monsieur Germain asks Claude to stop writing about this family and leave them alone, but Claude doesn't understand why the professor is saying this. Claude really wants to finish this story. He likes the way he and the teacher interact, but Monsieur Germain has become a traitor to him. The teacher finds a new part of the story in the trash, and after reading it learns that Esther is pregnant, her husband has set fire to his boss's car, and Raphael is asking for a new tutor because Claude can no longer come to their house. Monsieur Germain goes outside and finds Claude beaten up. Raphael has attacked him. The teacher discovers that Claude hardly invented any of what he wrote in his story. Monsieur Germain asks Claude to finish the story and write the ending, but Claude is too upset since he will no longer be able to see Esther. He has genuinely fallen in love with her. Claude visits Esther's house again and meets with her. He suggests that they run away from the city together since there is nothing keeping her there. He says he wants to save her from the life she has with this family, but Esther replies that she can't leave with him because she can't abandon her family. They will soon be moving to China. Claude kisses her one more time, and she leaves. Claude realizes that Esther was not his main goal. He decides to finish the story. To do this, he goes to his teacher's apartment and meets his wife. Jeanne lets him in, and he returns the books the teacher had given him. In reality, Claude had dreamed from the beginning of getting into his teacher's house, finding out how he lives, and of course, seeing his wife. Jeanne gives the boy a book written by her husband and says that Claude and Germain are very much alike. Meanwhile, Raphael tells the school principal that Monsieur Germain helped him cheat on a math test. Germain is expelled from the school, returns home, and finds the final chapter of the story, where he reads about how Claude watched his sleeping wife. Germain thinks his wife has cheated on him and attacks her. Jeanne hits her husband on the head and leaves the house forever. Germain loses both his wife and his job. Soon after, he meets with Claude, and they look at the house in front of them, pondering what the people who live there are doing. Claude says he wants to continue writing the story, but to do so, he must get inside the stranger's house. Germain says that it won't be as easy as the last time, but Claude is not discouraged and says that together they will manage to write a new story. This is the end of the movie. That's all for today. Subscribe and like if you want more videos like this.